So they would make all these kind of comments saying that I would be good looking if I was of a fairer skin tone, for example, that it was a waste.
We do not know how to talk about race in a deeper, more profound way because we just don't talk about it.
Hi everyone, my name is Darcel. I'm 23 years old. I'm a final year student at the National University of Singapore.
Hi everyone, my name is Terence. I'm 51 years old. I'm a sociologist by training, and I'm interested in religion in Southeast Asia as well as multiculturalism. My definition of racial harmony is it's more of a concept and aspiration. I think it's something that you can never get to because it's like nirvana, but it's something that we kind of set our eyes and cast our eyes towards and journey towards. It's especially important if you're a multicultural society, right?
Yeah.
So you have different ethnic groups, different religious groups, and there's going to be friction. There's bound to be groups and people that say the wrong thing, rub each other the wrong way. How we deal with these tensions and frictions, I think that's what makes us special. And I think if we deal with it in the right manner, then I think we are one step closer towards racial harmony.
Racial harmony is an everyday affair in my life. I come from a very diverse family. We are very rich in culture. It did take me a while, honestly, to be fully appreciative of my diverse background because at times people would be very confused and they might tease me just for my background.
May I ask, what was the confusion? I mean, Indians are they are part and parcel of Singaporean identity. So what confused these people over your identity as an Indian?
Right, so I'm Indian, but I studied Malay in primary and secondary school. People will ask me, Darcel, how can you be Indian but you don't know how to speak Tamil or any other Indian languages?
And you speak Malay.
I speak Malay, yes. At home, my family and I, we solely speak English. On my IC, my birth cert, I'm Indian. But I do have a little bit of a mixed heritage. I have Peranakan origins as well.
With 75%, 70% of Singaporeans Chinese, I think it's very easy to have blind spots. In Singapore, for example, the use of Mandarin, the use of Chinese dialects, for example, that would be a blind spot because there is exclusion, right? Ethnic minorities might not understand Mandarin, especially if you're in a social setting. And if you speak in Mandarin and there is an ethnic minority friend or colleague at the table, that person automatically feels left out of the conversation. Another one would be signs in Chinese and in Mandarin, or when they promote something, an item in a shopping mall, and they're all hollering out in Mandarin and in Chinese. It strikes me as very exclusive because you are saying, oh, my market's only the Chinese-speaking market.
Sometimes when you go to a shopping mall, for example, or even to the hawker center, there might be someone who can only speak in Chinese. And sometimes I would have to ask my friends to help me order something on my behalf. But I have seen some posts on social media where people have commented about how hard it is as an ethnic minority in Singapore to rent a room. But we also have to think, why is that the case? Would it be because of their cooking habits, for an example? You just never know, maybe that person refuses to rent because of a serious issue that he has. Could be something racist, so much to think about.
It's one of those things that comes with being a multicultural society. And I think the ethnic majority needs to be consciously aware that sometimes they're doing things that they might not mean to do, but they inevitably kind of impact their minority friends. So the question then is, what do we do, right? Can the government come in and legislate and say, no, we're going to pass a law that says you have to rent to anybody who meets your asking price? I mean, then owners do have property rights. So how do we get about this? I think it's about education. It's about ensuring that people do not see in racial terms as much as possible. So I think microaggressions are words or actions that are uttered or enacted in a very subtle, indirect manner, whether intentionally or not, that would discriminate a particular group. I would like to believe that many instances of microaggression are not intended to hurt or to embarrass a person. But hey, I mean, if you feel hurt and if you feel embarrassed and you feel aggrieved, no one can tell you that you do not feel that way.
More often than not, they are very subtle remarks. Sometimes they're seen as backhanded compliments, for example. I don't face microaggressions on a frequent basis in my life. I have, however, borne the brunt of such remarks before. When I was in primary and secondary school, I had a couple of schoolmates teasing me, and some of them even bullied me just because I'm Indian. So they would make all these kind of comments saying that I would be good looking if I was of a fairer skin tone, for example, that it was a waste. This one time in primary school when someone said, oh, luckily I'm not so dark, and I had to correct them that, hey, like what they said was not right, and you are implying that people of a darker skin tones are not very attractive or good looking. So obviously there's a tinge of colorism to that. There's an aspect of racism. From time to time, I've received, again, backhanded compliments such as, you are pretty for an Indian. And to me, while they're coming from a very innocent place, they mean it to be a compliment, like, wow, you're very pretty, but I see it as an insult because you're insulting my race. You're implying that Indians can't be pretty, we can't be good looking.
It's almost like you're pretty despite being an Indian.
Yeah,
kinda, right?
as if it's supposed to be a surprise, and I'm supposed to be like, wow, thank you so
very
much.
Yeah. So what do you do? What do you do when you are faced with things like that?
I always try to be very calm and very patient. A lot of these microaggression remarks I receive from friends. And I know that my friends would never want to pull me down. They would never want to upset me. If they knew that what they were saying were actually very harmful, I don't think they would have said it at all. So I try to educate them and say like, hey, saying these kind of things, you're putting down people of my own ethnic group. No matter how frustrating or annoying it can be, and trust me, it gets a bit annoying sometimes.
I can only imagine.
Yes, you must always remain non-confrontational, and I believe that's the best way to get your message across to someone.
The natural reaction to be very defensive. If you react very harshly, it's the person will be, no, actually I didn't mean that way. What I meant was, and then they'll be very defensive and would refuse to hear and listen very deeply. I think these people really need to kind of reflect on what they're actually saying and how it makes people feel. You don't know what trigger people, you don't know what bad experiences they might have had as a child or as a young adult, the kind of trauma that they might have gone through. And to hear something that is racial or ethnically inclined might possess certain trigger words, right? And that brings back really bad memories. While the person who utters that joke or remark saying, well, it's casual, I didn't mean it that way, but I think certain words can just recall memories, bad memories. And you say, oh, why are you so angry over something so trivial? Well, there is a reason. There usually is a reason why people are like that. Casual to you does not mean casual to the listener or the person who receives it.
There have been some times when people will make unkind remarks about me, and it takes me back to a certain place in life. Again, when I was in primary and secondary school, I didn't have many friends, to be honest, because I felt that I was a little bit of an outsider. I felt that way, that I didn't really belong. If it's a conversation with a friend, you should always take this moment to tell them like, hey, what you said just didn't sit right with me and I need some time to process it and I'll talk to you later. I don't think you should always respond to people when you're angry or when you're feeling upset, because you might say something that could hurt them back. And for me personally, I would never want to upset people. I would never want to harm anyone, especially people I love.
Yeah, definitely. And the worst thing you can say to someone like feeling that, hey, you're a bit too sensitive. Why are you so riled up? You need to chill out a bit. I think that's the worst thing you can say to anybody when the person has very authentic and genuine feelings of hurt.
We should always embrace each other's differences. And obviously, as a very multicultural, cosmopolitan society, we're very diverse. So it's natural you see people of all kinds of skin tones, for an example, with different features, and they come from all kinds of backgrounds. So instead of making all of these jokes that may only be funny to you, you should instead embrace all these differences, and if you're really interested in getting to know more about a certain culture or practice, you should ask questions in a very polite manner, and you shouldn't poke fun just because someone is different at you. That's not very respectful or nice.
We have to understand that these people will never go away, right? People will always think in terms of racial terms. I'm a bit of a realist, and I think that race will never be kind of washed away from society. And I believe that we're never going to rid ourselves of racial lenses, stereotypes. That's inevitable because people will always pigeonhole other people. It's just easier for people to think about society when they're all nicely pigeonholed. And with these pigeonholes come stereotypes. So I think we'll never get rid of that. It's also important for us to kind of build a certain resilience to these types of microaggressions, not condoning it, but to say that, look, this will not make or break me. If we are constantly kind of hung up about what the person said about the color of my skin 2 days ago, and I'm still stewing in my, frustrations over it, then we don't live our own lives. We don't live our lives to the maximum. I'm very conscious that I'm speaking from a racial majority perspective. I don't know how an ethnic minority feels.
I'm reminded of this incident in 2019 where a Singaporean beauty influencer posted on Instagram a picture of two Sikh guys wearing turbans at a concert, and she called them huge obstructions. So this is obviously very, very insensitive, and a lot of people from the Sikh community as well as other Singaporeans, they were very upset with her comment. I like how some members of the Sikh community responded. So they could have been angry, they could have just called her all kinds of names on social media, which a lot of people were doing, but instead the Young Sikh Association, they took this opportunity to invite her down to their temple, a Gurdwara, and they educated her on their cultural practices and why they wear the turbans. And to me, I thought that was very beautiful, and the takeaway was that she was able to learn more about a culture she didn't know, and she learned to be more mindful and more respectful and obviously sensitive. So I like how there is a mutual sense of understanding and sensitivity. I aspire to react in that way.
I think the Sikh community was just reacted in a very wonderful manner, taking that incident and turning into a teachable moment.
Yes.
Having these conversations are important, but just as important are the acknowledgement of the ground rules, decorum, and how your words make people feel as well. Unfortunately, there are people like that in the ethnic majority because they feel that they don't need to, right? They can go through the entire day not speaking to an Indian or a Malay, and there is no incentive to learn about minority culture, minority race, minority issues. People need to want to learn. Well, who should be responsible? I think everyone. You, me, our friends, people in positions of power, authority, educators. I think we need to be made aware of how these remarks can mean different things to different people. Just because they are benign to you does not mean they are benign to the listener.
I think that everyone is responsible for themselves at the end of the day. And again, in this day and age, social media is right there for you to use. Is whether or not you want to learn, right? We have Racial Harmony Day celebrations in school, and while that's also a great opportunity for people to learn about different kinds of cultures that they're not exposed to on a daily basis, I also feel that we should have more talks, more workshops, having like a cultural night every month or so.
I think it's not just about putting on ethnic costumes and
dancing
dancing
together.
together.
Something that's too performative. You want something that will instill something in you at the end of the day, something you can actually take back and learn from. I think that's very important to have.
Agreed. I think we are only beginning to learn to talk about race in Singapore because for the longest time, it has been a taboo topic. We do not know how to talk about race in a deeper, more profound way because we just don't talk about it, right? We just leave it to the government to manage, right? And so Singaporeans do not have the vocabulary to deal with it. But I think it's been changing in the last few years. Younger generations, the millennials and Gen Zs, are more willing to talk about race. They're more willing to talk about what is unacceptable. And I think that's great. I think these are things that you need to put on the table to talk about.
For racial minorities, it may be a little bit hard because once again, it could stem from a place of trauma, could bring them back to a darker time in their lives. And for others, maybe they just don't really see it as a worthwhile conversation to have. But that's when I think both parties need to put in effort to have a very cordial, comfortable, and obviously a very educational conversation.
To listen and not want to try and convince and try and make a point or try to change people's mind. But you come to the table with the spirit of learning. I'm just here to listen to you and kind of understand where you're coming from. And I think that's a good starting point. So I think the issue of racial microaggressions is an everyday affair. People feel it every day, but at the same time, it's extremely complex because on one hand, it impacts the subjective experience. So I think microaggressions is one of those things that is subjective, but you need to bring it beyond the subjective. You have to talk about it with other people.
While I do think that the topic of racial microaggression has been discussed both online and in physical, I still do think that there needs to be more effort put. Even for me as a racial minority, there's still so much that I don't know about other people's cultures or even about Indian culture, and it's always best to rise above, to be the bigger person and to help people understand your perspective, where you're coming from, how you feel about something, and why such a comment should or should not be made.
I think if you are part of the majority, sometimes you take things for granted and you have certain blind spots. And it's always good to speak to ethnic minority friends who can sensitize you to certain issues